Now I would like to give you an overview of the ERP Doctor ERP Accelerator methodology, exactly what the ERP Doctor advises clients to do in order to secure an exceptional ERP outcome that boosts efficiency and effectiveness, profitability, competitiveness, shareholder satisfaction, CEO reputation. Who is James Robertson? I'm a professional engineer with a bachelor's and doctoral degrees in engineering. Very diverse experience. I'm a former military commander, lieutenant colonel. I know what it's like to lead a large organization of unwilling conscripts. I have a grounding in economics. I understand what's necessary for businesses to make profit. I have a deep strategic understanding of and ability to discern the strategic essence of businesses. I have deep executive experience, understanding, and insight. I've been advising in the executive suite for many, many years. I have considerable skill with regard to taxonomies and classifications. And I have diverse, deep ERP experience, including troubleshooting and turning around many, many cases. So I have a solid understanding of the basics of software design and construction, so I can talk to technical people on a reasonable footing. This unconventional body of knowledge and experience positions me uniquely to deliver a radically better ERP outcome. What's different about my approach? Why should you consider it? My methods are my own. They're radically different and better. They're developed from a first principles engineering, military, and strategy approach and lots of practical experience. They're proven in practice, learned by trial and error and practical observation. They're not contaminated with the standard industry thinking that delivers 70% of suboptimal ERP executive outcomes. They're totally different and dramatically better. I help the client to model the real world in the ERP, making it easy to understand and easy to report on. Are you dissatisfied with your ERP? Then please listen on. Why is this important? What is different? The gun is neither good nor bad. The value of the gun is determined by the person holding the gun. If the gun is pointed at you, then the gun is bad. If the gun is pointed at someone you consider to be bad, then the gun is good. The value of technology is determined by the person using the technology, and the ERP Doctor ERP Accelerator focuses on this. This is not about technology. All mainstream ERP software is robust, reliable, well-designed, and well-built. The issue is not the software, folks. The issue is what you do with the software. Why is the ERP Doctor ERP Accelerator important? ERP suboptimal outcomes at the executive level are rampant. Different views indicate from 55% to 95% of ERP implementations do not deliver what was promised at the executive level. The average figure of 70% has been around for over 20 years, and some sources suggest off the record that the figure is closer to 95% at the executive level. Numerous consulting firms have been advertising they have the solution for years, and yet the situation has not improved. A drastically different and better method is called for. The ERP Doctor ERP Accelerator approach is the answer. Some articles on the subject. A Google search for percentage of ERP projects that do not deliver what was promised comes up with a result. Gartner, 55 to 75%. You can't really get more credible than Gartner as an authority. Searching on ChatGPT, 72% of ERP implementations do not deliver what was promised at the strategic executive level. Inadequate executive decision support is 25% of that. ChatGPT sources: Gartner, Forrester, Panorama Consulting, industry case studies and postmortems, SAP and Oracle post-project reviews, CIO.com and Tech Republic, anecdotal field reports and forums, ERP user communities, Reddit, SAP communities, Spiceworks. 70% ERP non-performance figure has been around for decades. The ERP industry implementers, big and small, and consultants, big and small, are all getting better at doing the things that deliver the 70% plus suboptimal executive outcome. Albert Einstein is reported to have said insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So that's a good reason to listen to this presentation. Can you relate to this experience? Please type yes in the chat if you can. How is value created? Value is created by business actions that deliver on the essence of why the organization exists and how it thrives. Value manifests through increased profitability, growth, acquisitions, job satisfaction, fulfillment of the strategic vision. Value is the consequence of intuitive, intelligent, informed leadership business decisions, in other words, thrive decisions. Such decisions are facilitated, accelerated, and enhanced through access to more meaningful and intelligent and relevant information. Answers to the questions I've not yet thought to ask. Such intelligent data is assembled as a consequence of high-level strategic and executive-level input into the design of the data content. Taxonomy is designed to catalog every conceivable relevant classification ahead of time. Now an overview of the ERP Doctor ERP Accelerator methodology. This methodology has evolved over the years, it's been proven in practice, and I'm now going to take you through, step by step, through the methodology. The first skill to master is diagnose ERP health. The problem I see is that CEOs cannot get the information they need from the ERP when they need it, and this is compromising profitability and competitiveness, and they do not know why. And that leads to suboptimal business decisions, shareholder dissatisfaction, and CEO reputational damage. So my clients use the ERP Doctor ERP Accelerator pulse measurement methodology and checklist to understand why the ERP is not delivering and what was promised and what is required to fix it. And the advantage that gives them is a clear picture of what needs to be done, coupled to tighter management control, increased profitability and competitiveness, leading to increased dividends and resultant shareholder satisfaction and improved CEO reputation. In doing this work as a graduate professional engineer, I've come to understand that engineers do not design bridges to stand up. Engineers design bridges not to fall down. Engineers design against failure and focus on preventing failure to achieve success. That's why I often talk about failure, because by preventing failure, I can ensure success. So don't be turned off by the fact that I talk about the negatives. There's a lot of people who say you shouldn't talk about the negative, but folks, if you don't recognize the negative exists, how do you prevent it from happening? What's a pulse measurement? I've investigated dozens of ERP implementations that have failed or were suboptimal, and advised clients how to turn them around. Pulse measurement is a concise diagnostic intervention. It starts with executive interviews, understand the strategic essence, the critical concerns, and the critical success factors. I then drill down to systems. The deliverable is a concise letter report presenting ±7 bullet point experientially based findings weighted, and ±7 experientially based recommended actions also weighted. The findings are frequently so practical that the client can continue unaided. This is all based on a deep experientially based understanding of what does and does not work with regard to ERP. I like to look at the pulse measurement, and I have this play on the ERP Doctor. When you go to a medical practitioner, general practitioner, that person will ask you a series of questions, take a few readings, blood pressure, pulse, etc., and they will make a diagnosis. Based on years of training and years of experience, they will either say to you, here's a prescription, take these tablets for 6 weeks or 6 days or whatever, and call me if it doesn't go away, or hold on, I'm going to call an ambulance, or take 2 aspirin and call me in the morning. I do the same. I've done this so many times that I've come across just about everything that can go wrong, and I know just about everything that can be done to fix it. And that's encapsulated in my approach. In response to the pulse measurements, I analyzed all my experience to date and extracted the 7 critical factors causing failure and the 7 critical factors for success. I then wrote the book, The Critical Factors for Information Technology Investment Success. Since then, I have authored and presented courses and executive briefings based on the book. Why your ERP is not delivering and how to fix it, a 5-hour executive briefing. ERP in Strategic and Competitive Management, a full-day management course. The Critical Factors for ERP Investment Success, a 2-day management course. These have been presented dozens of times over many years, so I really know my material intimately. The second skill to master is dictate CEO and C-suite custody. The problem I see is that the CEO is the custodian of the holistic integrated view of the business, which is the domain of the ERP. but someone else is responsible for the operation of the ERP. Without CEO executive direction into the ERP implementation, there cannot be executive level output from the ERP. And that leads to suboptimal system governance, giving rise to suboptimal configuration and skewed implementation that is deficient and damages the business. So my clients appoint the CEO as custodian of the ERP and use the ERP Doctor Executive ERP checklist and charters to establish C-suite ownership of the respective modules, supported by a senior expert advisor and agent, the strategic ERP project leader, together with implemented executive custody and project management by the implemented team. And the advantage that gives them is tight management of the ERP by the CEO and the C-suite, so that the business owns and guides the ERP at the highest possible level. The options. Top-down strategy-focused design. And what you can see there is you have a clear view of what the goal is, what the essence is, and how the business differentiates itself, what the executive information requirement is, and you cascade it down into the design. Alternatively, you can do bottom-up design. Start with the processes, and you can sit with mid-level staff who have no idea of what that top view looks like, and spend a whole lot of time mapping processes. And by the way, they tend to be inaccurate. I once had an experience where the client got very upset with me because I was focused on precision configuration and was ignoring process. So we brought in a consultant to map the processes. He sat with the two creditors clerks. They gave him two different processes for the creditors process. He documented what he thought was the best process, and he sat with the two ladies, and they said, no, that's not the way it is at all, and they gave him something completely different. Why? Because there are actually something like 7 creditors or accounts payable processes, varying from if you're ordering standard pens from the local stationers on a standard account through to massive capital acquisition. Process is not the place to start if you want a strategic ERP implementation. Precision configuration driven by the executive suite is where you start. So what is strategy? Professor Malcolm MacDonald defines strategy as doing the right things viewed from the customer's perspective, and tactics as doing things right viewed from the customer's perspective. MacDonald states that if a business does the right things well, it will thrive, and that's the basis of my logo. He goes on to say that if the business does the wrong things, it will die. It's just a matter of how quickly. I've seen badly executed ERP implementations put a company out of business, and badly executed ERP implementations do considerable damage. An example. The client had a service promise. Order into the call center by 3 in the afternoon. We will dispatch no later than 10 a.m. next business day. They didn't want to take chances. They went with one of the top 4 consultancies in the world. Big brand, you'd know it if I mentioned it. And they went with a big brand ERP. The day they went live, they missed their service promise by 2 days. 6 months later, they'd fired the implementers and hired another big brand firm. They lost their biggest customer, 40% of revenue, out the door like that. They were no closer to an answer. They brought me in. In 3 days, I told them what the problem was, but I could not find anybody who could tell me how to fix it. I told them how to fix it, and in 6 weeks they were back, up and running, and the lost customer came back to them. They nearly went out of business. And that is the measure of what a failure to understand the strategy of the business can do in an ERP implementation. The third skill to master is strategic alignment of the ERP. The problem I see is that the strategic essence of the business is poorly defined and the ERP is implemented in a manner that ignores, contradicts, and cripples business strategy, and that leads to loss of competitiveness and overall strategic inefficiency that compromises profitability and competitiveness. So my clients undertake thorough strategic analysis using the ERP Doctor StratSnap methodology and checklist and weave the results into every facet of the configuration and implementation of the ERP to get strategic information out. There must be executive strategic input to the implementation and management of the ERP. And the advantage that gives clients is that the entire organization is strategically aligned and becomes more strategically effective and efficient, therefore more competitive and more profitable with resultant reputational benefits. What is my definition of strategy? The essence of why the organization exists and how it thrives. Strategy is a holistic, integrated picture of how the entire organization fits together and interoperates with the external environment to produce a thrive outcome. On commencement of the project, I undertake strategic analysis with the C-suite, StratSnap critical concerns with regard to the ERP project, StratSnap critical strategic requirements for the ERP project, StratSnap critical success factors for the ERP project, other StratSnaps as necessary, possibly one or more further workshops with major divisions, including manufacturing, operations, finance, etc. The project should recommence with this to set the strategic direction and ensures leadership are all on the same page. Part of the process, critical factors weighted according to the StratSnap. And what you see here is an output of one of the workshops. And what you have there on the left is 7 critical factors that have been synthesized and formulated by the management team. This is the team, the initials across the top there. And what you see there for this third factor, 2 of the people think that it's 25% of what's important, and somebody else thinks it's 7% of what's important. So what we get here is what I call the views of the mountain. If we take it that the project is to get the business to the top of the mountain, it's legitimate that people all see the business differently. So production, operations, marketing, finance, etc. will legitimately see the business differently. However, if they all set different priorities for the ERP project, they will end up all over the place, all trying to climb the mountain their own way. So it's absolutely vital to agree one way up the mountain. And that's part of what the StratSnap process does. It facilitates the top team or any other team to come into alignment in terms of what the critical factors are and in terms of what the priorities are. Have you had experience of different views around the table? If so, please type yes in the chat. Strategic trajectory. This one is ho-hum with room for improvement. So what we're looking at here, folks, is in this case, it's a 3-year time view. We're saying 3 years ago the system was a 4 out of 10. Today it's a 4.2 out of 10. If we keep going the way we're going, we might get to about a 4.8 out of 10. We want to be at least a 7.2 out of 10. But what we can see here is that the ERP is going in the right direction, even if it's only just going in the right direction. And we saw that clearly with the example that I shared a few minutes ago. And then we can see the gap that needs to be closed, and we can formulate what needs to be done in order to close that gap, as I did for XYZ Group. Here's another example, very, very different, heading for the rocks at a cracking pace. Clear diagnostic. This might be telling you you need to replace your ERP, but it could be telling you other things as well. It has to be seen in context. So why is strategic alignment critical? The essence of the business must be accurately modeled in the ERP. Lack of strategic alignment can result in the ERP getting in the way of the strategic fundamentals of the business and crippling it, as in the example just shared. Constantly monitor the ERP implementation against the essence, the right things from the customer's perspective. Look for opportunities to use the ERP implementation to differentiate against competitors. Strengthen the strategic driving force. The time dependency of strategy. Strategy is not a forecast. You need a forecast, but it's not strategy. It's also not an objective. You need a goal, but it's also not a strategy. A strategic plan is a path to competitive advantage. A strategic plan is an exponential curve whereby you apply forces at the beginning to bring about change in the organization in the end. And here we see an example, Gillette, and you're all familiar with the modern Gillette brand. It's quite prestigious, and that's the trajectory of change that the CEO took that company through for exponential growth. And that's the sort of thing that we're talking about, doing things differently and better viewed from the customer's perspective and using the ERP to facilitate that. And a little bit later in this presentation, I will share with you a fair amount of detail about where I managed to do that for a client of mine. Here we just see that differently, just the point that I made a minute ago. Strategic change requires forces to be applied to the business. Forces, projects, initiative, policy changes to be applied to the business in order to achieve the required strategic objectives. The fourth skill to master is decision, whether to remediate, re-implement, or replace the ERP. The problem I see is that executives and managers are convinced that they have the wrong ERP because the ERP is so inefficient and so difficult to use at the strategic executive level, and that leads them being paralyzed from taking measures to remediate the situation, notwithstanding the reality that 95% of faulty ERPs can be remediated. And the advantage that gives them is that client executives immediately start taking constructive actions to address the situation and remediate or re-implement the ERP or replace it. So my clients' executives apply the ERP Accelerator decision checklist and score sheet, and where applicable, the ERP Doctor secure procurement methodology, and go forward decisively with a clear plan to remediate, re-implement, or replace as appropriate. The fifth skill to master is precision ERP configuration. The problem I see is that most ERPs are at best suboptimally or at worst shockingly badly configured. Tables like the chart of accounts, dimensions, item class, etc. are sloppy, illogical, and unstructured, making posting inaccurate and reporting a nightmare. And that leads to a situation where even simple reports are difficult to produce, reports do not agree, and overall efficiency and effectiveness of the business is severely compromised at the expense of profitability and competitiveness. So my clients use the ERP Doctor Precision ERP Configuration Checklist to evaluate the health of the ERP configuration, and then use the ERP Doctor Precision ERP Configuration methodology informed by the previous steps to systematically reconfigure the ERP. And the advantages that give them is that the ERP becomes easy to use, posting is fast and accurate, data quality improves dramatically. And analysis and reporting is simple and easy to do. They can get answers to questions they had not previously thought to ask with a few mouse clicks. And the ERP becomes the heart of a command console approach to board meetings. And what we see here is a library, and what one experiences when one goes to a well-run library is you're looking for a particular book, you go to the catalog, it tells you exactly what shelf to go to, you go there and there's the book. And this is what we're talking about when it comes to precision configuration. What you see there is a hierarchical structured list. This is also a chart of accounts and hierarchical structured codes. When it comes to precision ERP configuration, think of it this way. You need 16 8-gauge diameter, 1-inch long countersunk crosshead black wood screws for hinges to mount a door in your house. You visit the nearest hardware store expecting to find the screws in packets neatly arranged on shelves so you can quickly and easily locate the exact screws you're looking for. Instead, you find a jumbled mess of screws, nails, and other fasteners in a large bin, and the shop assistant advises you to empty the bin on the floor and assures you that you will find what you're looking for, and offers you a complex bit of machinery at £5 an hour to help you find what you're looking for. Would you do this? Or would you turn on your heel and go to another hardware store where the screws are neatly arranged? This mishmash of screws and complex software is the way that the content in many ERP validation tables is arranged, as per the examples following. And many organizations pay expensive consultants to search for the screws in the jumbled mess, and every time someone adds new screws to the pile, they start all over again. An extreme example of bad practice. Here's a company that went bankrupt because of sloppy configuration in the chart of accounts. So what you see here is a completely unstructured list. Safety clothing, sand and stone, consumable, services, fairly big ticket item, skips and cages, an asset, all jumbled up together. The mess was so bad that when I interviewed the CEO, he said to me, "James, I have one tunnel. They cannot tell me what it's costing per meter to drive that tunnel. In a year's time, I will have 30 tunnels. What am I going to do?" I then found out that they had hired a lady who was a registered chartered accountant who had spent 6 months trying to balance the financial statements and failing. And you've only got to look at that to understand why that happened. I advised them to re-implement. They decided that that was more than they could swallow. 3 months later, they went bankrupt. Another very simple example. The darn system has lost my data, in this case nearly 1 million. What you find here, this is an integration table setting up mappings to the general ledger, and somebody had left out a whole lot of codes. Very simple to fix. 1 million found like that. What is a taxonomy? A taxonomy is a logical word semantic structure, a precision vocabulary of preferred terms. It conveys understanding between humans with relevant knowledge and experience. Once linked to a precision code scheme, the most important communication mechanism between computers and people. An art and a science. And once it's right, it's obvious. I frequently encounter people who think that that sort of thing is trivial and they think it's easy. It requires strategic insight from the top team to set the priorities for that hierarchy. It requires a comprehensive understanding of the business to establish the detailed content. But once you have captured that level of detail, you have something powerful. What is a code scheme? Computers only understand binary. The code is a unique binary pattern that corresponds to the structured English taxonomy. It's the only way the computer will appear to be intelligent. It results in intelligent data. I apply standard conventions, indents and trailing periods, capitalization, etc., which you can see in that table. The sixth skill to master is prove it works, war games and rigorous testing. The problem I see is that most ERPs are suboptimally or shockingly badly tested before go live. User acceptance testing, UAT, is a wholly inadequate concept, and that leads to hacked last-minute fixes, inadequately trained staff who use the ERP inefficiently, half-baked processes, deficient reports, and generally suboptimal ERP functioning. So my clients use the ERP Doctor Prove It Works methodology and checklist to comprehensively test the ERP, define the processes, develop and test the reports, the data warehouse and business intelligence, and exhaustively train the staff. And the advantage that gives them is that the ERP is reliable and dependable from day one. Staff are familiar with the ERP at go live, and the go live is smooth and uneventful. Folks, if you stop and think for a moment of the couple of really unpleasant situations that I've shared with you, you will recognize that not one of those ERPs was properly tested before go live. The seventh skill to master is make it work. Effortless go live. The problem I see is that most ERPs experience problems at and after go live that at best result in short-term inefficiency and ineffectiveness, and at worst continuously compromise the effectiveness and efficiency of the business. And that leads to distrust of the ERP, spreadsheets to track information that's not available from the ERP, managers doing their own thing without overall control, and general business dysfunction. So my clients exercise strong executive strategic leadership guided by the ERP Doctor Make It Work methodology and checklist to ensure that the precisely configured ERP works to its full potential and achieves all that was promised in the original marketing pitch. This is coupled to a tough, accountable go-live certificate with contracted signed accountability with penalties that hold the implementers, the C-suite and the project team, and ultimately the CEO accountable for the outcome. And the advantage that gives them is that the ERP goes live quickly and without incident and is established as a high-value strategic competitive resource, boosting productivity, profitability, shareholder satisfaction, and CEO reputation from day one. And you'll remember my example of the CEO of XYZ Group, who once he was satisfied that the ERP could be made to work, took that stance. I call it the make it work stance. Gentlemen, we've seen that this can work. I don't want any more corridor talk. Now make it work. And that's a state of mind which a CEO can only hope to embrace with a thorough ownership of the system. The result of all of this is a Thrive outcome facilitated by the ERP Doctor Thrive checklist and methodology. Management of all facets of the business is tighter, and that leads to the business being more lean, so my clients experience greater profitability. And in addition, management reporting is easier, faster, and more flexible, and that leads to answers to questions executives had not previously thought to ask, now available at the click of a mouse. In addition, the reports are stable and all agree, so new, more advanced analysis becomes possible. And in addition, transaction entry and posting is faster and more accurate, and that leads to better quality transaction data and fewer clerical staff. In addition, because the data is so easy to understand, the business no longer requires ongoing involvement of expensive consultants. Would you like that from your ERP? Type yes in the chat if you agree. Success from the ERP Accelerator. Reg Barry, major shareholder, CFO and COO of V3 Consulting Engineers, presented with me at a conference. The auditors just left after 6 weeks. Last year they were here for 6 months. They signed off the balance sheet without qualifications for the first time in 15 years. We have masses of management information. Profitability has improved, and we did it with one less bookkeeper. The ERP Accelerator Executive Briefing and 4-day course will teach you how to do this. Because the executive team understand and own the ERP, every facet of the operation of the ERP and every facet of the business that the ERP impacts becomes faster, more reliable, and more effective. And in addition, because the precision configuration so accurately models the real world, it has become possible to develop small pieces of clever, bespoke software around the ERP to enhance business effectiveness and enable things that were previously done in spreadsheets to be integrated. And that leads to significantly increased competitiveness. And finally, the bottom line is that an ERP implemented fully in compliance with the ERP Doctor ERP Accelerator results in a business that is leaner, more profitable, and more competitive. And that leads to accelerated growth, increased shareholder value, and enhanced reputation for the CEO and all team members involved in the project. So to sum up, unlock the full potential of your ERP. This is a fundamentally different approach. Strategic executive input results in strategic executive level output. Model the real world. Results in a leaner, more efficient, and more profitable organization. Enables improved competitiveness. A game changer for your organization. Folks, this really can change the rules of the game for your organization. Look at the case studies. What are the Thrive specifics? The business is more profitable and is growing strongly. The ERP is powerfully strategically aligned. The C-suite and all managers get the information they want when they need it. The board pack is produced almost entirely out of the ERP and BI with limited manual effort. Audit time and costs are dramatically reduced. Risk of audit qualifications are considerably reduced. The opportunity for longer-term improved resource management, reduced headcount. The business attains all that was originally expected from the ERP. Unlock the full potential of your ERP with the ERP Doctor ERP Accelerator. And on the course and the briefing, I will tell you how to do that. Further Thrive specifics. Answers to almost any question relating to data in the ERP available with a few mouse clicks. Even answers to questions the business had not thought previously to ask. The consultants left soon after commissioning. The ERP is a valued resource in assisting management to make the business more successful. Potentially reduction in back office headcount. Line management time on administrative matters reduced to focus on production while improving quality of management information. So what is really different about the ERP Doctor ERP Accelerator approach? Executive custody and executive direction and facilitation. Strong focus on the strategic essence of the business. Strong focus on enabling better business decisions through high quality data. Precision configuration, taxonomies informed by executive strategic decision support emphasis. Model the real world. Laboratory, war games, user acceptance testing, ++. Contractual go live certificate. Turns conventional ERP implementation thinking on its head. Last but by no means least, process is a design output and not an input to implementation. Traditionally, from my experience, change in approach with regard to process is not understood by the ERP and management consulting industry. Really remind you of the case of the two clerks. The whole focus is wrong. Think of my strategic top-down process bottom-up diagram. The industry's got it wrong, folks. And as an engineer, I'm telling you that. Process is something you design at the end once you have modeled the business, because as you model the business, the processes become clear. Sitting down with mid-level staff and telling you how they do their jobs and capturing into a system and expecting that to enable strategic decision support. I refer you to what Einstein is reported to have said. Would you like to learn more about precision ERP configuration? Please type yes in the chat if you would. Following this, I will take a deep dive into precision ERP configuration with information you can apply immediately.